Welcome and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for attending our event in support of International Women's Day 2021. Going to introduce Muriel, who is our host for today, and then talk a little bit about the event before I hand over to her. So Muriel has a background in the food industry and is a founder of an organisation called Be Otherwise Limited. And it all started with food and where it came from with the importance of the produce linked to the land. Muriel has also become a partner for CSR accreditation and has been supporting us as part of the steering group and in terms of promoting social responsibility to organisations of all shapes and sizes. So today we are delighted to support International Women's Day with this hour-long event, and it does have a impact in terms of that social responsible agenda. A responsible business can play its part in making society a better place by encouraging diversity and inclusion through recruitment, the workforce and the supply chain. So today we have a wonderful panel of guests who I will quickly introduce, and then I'll hand over to Muriel, who can ask them a series of questions to engage around the impact that COVID has had on our lives, on our working lives, and on the future that we have beyond COVID. So I'd like to introduce you firstly, in the order I have it written down, to Countess Howe, Elizabeth Howe, HM Lord Lieutenant of Buckinghamshire and Chairman of Heart of Bucks, so has an important connection with Heart of Bucks and with charity. Tony Kent, who's a professional speaker, compere and stand-up, social mobility and women in tech. Dr. Hannah Albana, who's the International Initiatives Manager at Global One and researcher at the Faith Regan Foundation. And Fiona Mack, Mack Consulting, lead facilitator and executive coach and senior yoga and meditation teacher. And as I say, all hosted by Muriel Bule, CEO at Be Otherwise Limited, and moderated, who you won't see on screen, but moderated by our own Jennifer Clark, who will be asking, checking the chat. I would love to encourage you all to ask questions throughout the session. And at the end of the session, we'll leave a little bit of time for the panel to answer those questions. So please do ask questions throughout, and Jennifer will keep an eye on those, and she will pass those on to Muriel at the end of the session so we can have a discussion about those. I think I've covered everything. All proceeds, incidentally, will go to Myeloma UK, and I think the event so far has raised, as of now, £217. So thank you ever so much for those donations. It makes a real difference. And you know, Myeloma UK are an incredible charity. They do a lot of work, and I know that will have a positive impact on what they're doing. So thank you ever so much for that. I think I've covered everything there, Muriel, unless there's something I've missed off. But if not, I'll hand straight over to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think we've covered all the main points. Thank you very much for everybody that is listening, and thank you very much for our lovely panelists today. We're going to talk about what everybody is talking about nowadays, the impact of COVID-19, but because today is this very special International Women's Day, we will look at it from a women's perspective. And between all of us, audience and panelists, we know that Women's Day is every day, really. But because the world is allowing us to celebrate today, let's celebrate together. So I would like to start with the panelists, maybe sharing personally what is the impact of this terrible disease and pandemic on their daily life, and maybe spend a minute each on sharing a personal experience. I'm going to follow the order on my screen. And Elizabeth, if you would like to start, please.
Thank you, Muriel, and it's lovely to be here. I'm thrilled to be able to take part. I come from a perspective of voluntary service, and certainly from my own personal perspective, things like my hair getting whiter and whiter, and the job of cooking every single meal every single day has definitely impacted on my life. But actually, it's in my charitable roles that the impact has been greatest. And I was appointed Lord Lieutenant of Buckinghamshire just in November. So whilst my role should be very much an outward facing role, I've actually had to conduct everything virtually. And that definitely has an impact on the way that you can conduct your relationships and get to know people. So that's been quite hard. On the other side, as chairman of Heart of Bucks, which is the community foundation for Buckinghamshire, I've been involved in assessing grant applications for us to make to charities that have been particularly impacted by COVID-19. So I don't know whether I've taken up too much time.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Hannah, you're the next on my screen. Would you like to share something that you're experiencing yourself?
Thank you so much, Meryl, and it's a pleasure really to be here among all those inspiring ladies and to celebrate International Women's Day. So taking the personal aspect of the impact of COVID-19, I would say, like the rest of the women who are working, I would say that during COVID, maybe the challenge that we had is that we had more childcare, we had more homeschooling duties, and maybe it was hard to balance these additional duties with works, especially that, we had to work from home, and making that balance was really a challenge. I would like also maybe to take the aspect of globally, the global aspect of women and the information.
Hannah, sorry, Hannah, maybe we'll come back to the global aspect, and then let's see, how it's affected people personally, and I'm looking forward to hear, the global impact, if you don't mind.
Sure.
If we could move to Fiona, and Fiona sharing a personal impact of what's happening right now.
Thanks, Muriel. So, yes, I think there's going to be a common theme here. And for me personally, I used to travel the world, delivering face-to-face events, leading workshops, facilitating communication, leadership type events. And all of my corporate work transitioned over to being virtual. And so whilst I was used to doing some of it virtually, it's a massive learning curve for me personally in a very short space of time. The other thing that I do is teach yoga and meditation. That all moved over to being virtual as well. So from somebody who was very much out and about and interacting face to face, flesh to flesh with people, that change has had an impact on me personally. And I've noticed it having an impact on those that I work with in a virtual way as well. So Zoom fatigue is an actual thing, and many people I'm sure can relate to that in whatever it is that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I could go on, but I think that's an important thing that's impacted me personally.
Thanks a lot, Fiona. And I think everybody's nodding at the mention of Zoom fatigue. Mm-hmm. we all know what it means. Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. And what about you, Tony?
So a significant thing that happened for me personally is my mum died last year, and one thing that speaks to me about what happens to women is I've got a brother who is disabled, he's got complex needs, and I am now his next of kin. And I've kind of raised this today because I was on a call with 12 people from different social services groups in his care home, and what we're able to do virtually is incredible. But I think what I have kind of taken from the experience is, for many women, the emotional and practical needs of your family members fall to you. So I'm one of 6 siblings, but as the eldest perhaps, and as a woman, I think I am the carer. So I do the liaison with the care home, with social services. I look after that stuff, as well as now I'm online trying to be funny. So it's I think what lots of women are experiencing is that the homeschooling, the looking out for parents, the looking out for other family members, checking in on their friends, walking the dogs, doing some of the jobs that typically fall to women. So I think I've kind of personally had a real deep dive in just how much of that does fall to women over the past year.
Absolutely, Tony, absolutely. And actually, if I may mention, when we were organizing this event, we were debating about the best time of the day to when to run it. And there was a possibility that, you know, women would be on school run at this time of the day. And then somebody challenged it. I think it was Richard saying, but why should it be women running to school to catch get the kids? Why can't men, you know, take a break in their work days and do it? So I thought that was very interesting. But anyway, ladies, you all have, you know, also very important responsibilities, whether it's, you know, business work or all the charities that you support in. And I think it would be interesting to hear, you know, the trends and the impact that you've seen around you, especially for women. And Elizabeth, if you could cover, you know, the points, what you've seen in all the good work that you're doing.
Yes, it's been very interesting, actually. I'll start with some of the grants that we've been awarding. We've looked at groups that are specifically supporting the most vulnerable women in our communities. So, for example, there's a charity we've supported called Restore Hope, and they provide support and training in life skills, mentoring. They do quite a bit of horticulture, and they encourage people to learn about growing food and healthy eating and so on. And the grants for this particular charity can actually make a huge difference to individual lives. Sometimes it can even mean the difference between somebody falling into a life of crime or pulling their way out of it. And then there was another group that we've done, which is called Meet and Mingle. And Meet and Mingle is a group of ethnically diverse women who often aged 50, 55, 60 have retired and then found that they have become terribly isolated. And because they're no longer going out to work, they have no reason to go out of their house. And Meet and Mingle has provided the most wonderful forum for them to come together. They take part in exercise classes and art classes and discussion centres and things. And this has been life-changing for some of them who have been otherwise very, very lonely and shut away. So there have been groups that we've identified that can benefit from very specific support. And the grants that we make actually aren't financially very large, but in terms of the difference that they can make to people's lives, they're very significant.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And Hannah, you mentioned the global impact that you started talking about earlier. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so globally, the early data indicates that the pandemic had a devastating social and economic consequences on women and girls in all countries. And that's why the UN launched last year a report which shows that that COVID-19 could reverse the limited progress that has been made on gender equalities, and most specifically on SDG 5 gender equality. And that's why the International Labour, UN Women, the European Commission, they all have called all countries to put in place measures to promote gender equality in the context of a COVID-19 crisis. And most importantly, and as UN highlighted, the main challenge that was during COVID-19 is the shadow pandemic that came along COVID-19, which is gender violence. And according to so many reports, they've highlighted highlighted that there's 20% increase in domestic violence during this pandemic in specific, and in some countries with reported cases they highlight that there's 30% increase. So we know that during crisis, this is normally what happened even before, during 2014-2015 Ebola crisis and 2015-2016 Zika crisis. Same has happened, but what we need is we need to learn, you know, from the lessons. We know that this happened, so we should have at least measures to be put in place. So I think also this crisis with COVID-19 gave us another lesson that we need to have special measures when it comes to gender-based violence. I would say also globally with regards to the unpaid work, with regards to services, medical services for women, that's also been impacted. All the resources that used to go toward sexual health and sexual health services, toward maternal health, all being reduced in order to cover the new challenge that we had with COVID-19. The last challenge that also women in refugee settlement, previously they had the same, they were vulnerable to many other challenges, but with COVID-19 also that add additional challenge for them with all the other challenges that they had.
Okay, thank you. It's you know, you are touching on themes that certainly we've seen in the press over the past few months for sure, and they're all equally terrible. But it's a shame to acknowledge the fact that gender equality is going backwards for the moment, and hopefully what we're doing today is bringing it back on track, and in the right direction. Anyway, Fiona, would you want to comment as well on more general trends that you've observed in your line of work?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess what I hear from friends, from colleagues, from people I'm coaching or people who are on workshops is that women are working longer and harder hours than they have ever before in the last year. So they're trying to, and I hear this a lot, they're trying to juggle so many different things. So just, you know, if you're a working mum, then you're getting up ridiculously early to get work done before then getting involved in homeschooling, then navigating the demands of work and running a house and a home, trying to hold down a job so that you're then working again in the evening to catch up with the things that you can't do during the day because you're homeschooling. It's just resulting in huge amounts of burnout and stress. So that's certainly what I have noticed in both aspects of my work. And it's interesting that people come to me for coaching, but actually they probably want counselling. You know, they're meant, it's interesting that Hannah talked about this shadow pandemic of lack of gender equality. I think there's another shadow pandemic, which is mental health.
Yeah.
And it's had a massive impact on colleagues, friends, family, regardless of whether they are capable of vocalizing the effect that it's having on them. So some people put on their happy face, and I feel that they're putting on, and Tony, you might be able to speak to this a little bit more, but they're putting on their happy face, and it's almost like putting on a sticking plaster to some of the really serious mental health issues that I believe are going on. So anxiety, depression, stress, fear, this kind of low level of fear that we have running through our systems the whole time. And it doesn't just have an effect on us mentally, it actually has an effect on us physically. It compromises our immune system, and that just plays into the hands of the pandemic thing that we're having to deal with. So I'm quite passionate about this, but that's what I would add to the shadow pandemic that Hannah talked about.
Yeah.
That's a heavy shadow for sure. Sorry, Elizabeth, would you like to add anything to that, Elizabeth, before we go to Tony?
Yes, just to say that we have seen increased requests for help for groups that are supporting mental health issues. And there has been a huge demand for grants to be made in this particular area.
Yeah. I think what we know it's there. We know there's a lot of effort being made to support people. However, for me, the uncertainty is the long-term effect, and you know, learning to connect to others, you know, without the this, you know, barrier of the screen, and all the implication afterwards is going to be interesting. Tony, tell us, what have you seen? Because you also are involved with many wonderful things.
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. So one is I'm a champion for SmartWorks Reading, and they're a charity that give women free interview coaching and free work clothing. And the aim is to restore their confidence. So it could be a woman that's left the workplace to raise her children. She may have been to prison. She may have had mental health issues. So completely open to everyone, non-judgmental service. And the need for their services has not gone away, and they've continued to support women virtually. And I think that it's very easy for people to become invisible during the pandemic. So poverty becomes less visible because it's not happening in front of us. We're not seeing people face to face, and we become kind of tied up in what's going on in our little bubble, if you like. So that would be one thing, is that there are so many people that do need help. And I have heard a phrase being used of post-pandemic stress disorder, where therapists believe there will be this surge in need, or there is a surge in need. But the other thing I have found is that people really need to laugh. So I have done lots of stand-up online over the past year for WI groups, for which made me think of Meet and Mingle, for cancer, people that are receiving cancer treatment, or workplaces. So we need a bit of light as well. So I have found afterwards, sometimes people say, I just needed to laugh, Tony. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it heals a lot. Yes, it's a wonderful thing. Yes, and you know, you've mentioned a lot of interesting is not the right word. Facts, you know, gender equality, mental health, poverty, you know, invisibility. You're absolutely right. There's also the fact that women are, because of all the long list of, you know, tasks that you've mentioned, ladies, about the children, about the, you know, everything that is falling on your shoulder, like you said, Tony, initially. There's also the gap at work that is increasing because women are not putting themselves forward because they've got too much to do already. So they're not going to go for the next promotion or pick that fabulous project because the plate is overflowing and adding to it is not possible. And that's a shame because, yeah, they're missing out on something there, understandably. So if we were to, you know, pick up the mood of this webinar and look at the future, you know, spring is out, the daffodils are blossoming, it's beautiful. And we've been given, you know, a few dates that we are allowed to be hopeful about. What do you see as maybe a key action and maybe a key trend as to what's going to happen in the next few months? Elizabeth, if you want to start.
Yes, so having taken on this new role as Lord Lieutenant of Buckinghamshire, I am the Queen's representative in Buckinghamshire, and therefore am there to make awards on behalf of Her Majesty, to work with the military, to work with the magistracy in the courts, to work with business, and also obviously the charity sector. And so my hope is that by being able to get out into the communities, that these things can actually take place face to face, that I can acknowledge and recognize and thank and appreciate what people are doing in the county. And of course, the result of the pandemic has actually in one sense, like a silver lining, has actually brought communities together. And on a local scale, I would say that most people are much more connected now to their local community. Somebody has set up a community hub, a food bank, deliveries for collections for prescriptions and so on. And so I think there's been a much greater neighborliness. And I would very much like to see that continue. And certainly in my role as Lord Lieutenant, I have been able to write to every single care home in the county to thank them for their extraordinary work they've done in trying to keep their residents safe in the face of the most difficult conditions and lack of PPE and so on. So I think it's very much, from my point of view, a case of being able to thank, being able to show appreciation, have real life award ceremonies where we can do the Queen's Award for Excellence, or we can make the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service presentations, and just recognise the wonderful things that are going on in the county.
Thank you. That is really important, actually, to give people a pat on the back and saying well done and continue. And I won't dare repeating this lovely word that you use for community and neighborliness, but it's beautiful because that's people have found availability to help others that maybe they didn't feel they had before. And I agree with you, long it may last. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Hannah, what about you? Give us hope on a global scale, just that.
So I believe, Meryl, that as academics and as a person working in the charity sector and specifically in women-led organizations, and also as activists, I believe we have a responsibility to put forward ideas and recommendations for policymakers to ensure that COVID-19, to ensure that their responses take into consideration that gender perspective, and these policies that will affect, the lives of every citizen. So I would say first, we all know that the fiscal measurements adopted in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis had a disproportionately negative impact on women. So this should be avoided with COVID-19 responses. The second thing that I think also the gender perspective when it comes of the impact of COVID-19 on women should be analyzed. Data is key tool to prepare us to design the proper responses for this crisis, and to ensure that our COVID response are aligned with what we need with the SDG 5 gender equality. Also, I would say that globally more attention should be paid to refugee settlements, where women, as I mentioned, had huge challenges to cope with their lives there. Also, we urge decision makers and policy makers at all levels to listen and engage with women's group, to hear what they want, to hear their recommendations. Most importantly, we as international NGOs, or as community centers, or as civil society organizations, we need to empower those women. We need to equip them with the knowledge, with the skills, so they can lead their communities. Generally, I think we need to, in order to create this inclusive and more resilient societies, we need to ensure that our COVID responses are mainly human-centered in order to create this better normal that we are all looking for.
Absolutely. Allow me.
Yes.
Thank you, Hannah. And I think it's been demonstrated, and there's several studies that are showing that actually the more women are empowered and educated, the better the economy of the country where they live in. So forgive my crass expression, but it's a no-brainer, Let's do it. What about you, Fiona, in terms of, giving us hope for the few months to come?
Yeah, I think there are things that are you know, going to change, and they're going to stay changed. And some of those things are good things. So building on what Elizabeth and Hannah has said, really, from a personal point of view, I think we have all become more interested in understanding more about our health generally. So whether it's we're understanding terminology that we would never have even given a second of thought to. So the fact that we have been plunged into this arena where we ask more questions about health, we ask more questions about how can I be more healthy, perhaps that's a good thing. And I think there are some things that I bring from both aspects of the work that I do that I will be promoting and encouraging big time, which sounds really simple, but they make such a massive difference. And that is asking better quality questions and listening. If people did those two things better, the world would be a completely different place. When we get really curious, we understand way more. And when we really listen, we understand way more. So those two things I think are essential. And then for my yoga and meditation world, where again, I work with people on, and people think about yoga as being a few exercises. For me, it's not. It's a way of life. It's a way of thinking, and it's a practice. It's a daily practice. And I think more and more people are adopting daily practices, rituals, if you like, good quality habits that are going to not just sustain them during this time, but are going to sustain them for the rest of their lives. And things like having a gratitude practice where people actually count their blessings or have an attitude of gratitude, those things make a positive difference to mental health, to physical health, to relationships, and cost nothing. And women lead the way in this. And I hate to say it, but they do. And I think it's because we just naturally have that empathy. So when we have empathy, we're more connected to emotions, and we know the sorts of things that can help not just others, but ourselves feel better, so that we can live a better life. That's what I would add for the future.
Just that. Thank you very much. And being a student of Fiona, I can confirm that she does practice what she says, and it has kept me going for the past 12 months. Thank you, Fiona. Before I go on to Tony, to get your wisdom on the matter, Tony, I would remind the attendees to post question on the chat if there's any points that you want to see discussed further. But over to you, Tony. What's your hope for the next few months?
I think that we're going to, people will focus on having better quality face-to-face interactions. So, not everyone's going to return to the office or to the office full time. And I think that's causing people to say, if I have to travel somewhere, what's that going to be for? So I think there will be a continuation of a mixture of communicating online, and which helps us to reach more people. So, I did a performance where I was in 5 different states in the US and on somebody's boat and in a couple of places in Berkshire all at the same time. I couldn't do that in normal life. So that we've got some great gains to be made there. We can connect with more people, and we can do this, and it's fantastic. So then I think the face-to-face stuff is going to be like, well, who do I actually want to invest the time to meet with? So that's what I think people will feel more comfortable in doing as well, saying, do you know what, I'm not going to do those drinks or that thing that I don't feel that great about. Instead, I'm going to spend a couple of hours with one person that I really want to spend time with. So I think there'll be some of that. And my hope is that people, for women especially, make an effort to remain visible. And this was something that was really brought home to me when I did a performance for my local sixth form via Zoom, and the topic was social mobility, and we talked about poverty. And one of the kids said, well, is there poverty in this village? And so I think we need to keep making these topics visible, and as women remain visible. So I know lots of women that are in the second phase of their career. I'm probably on my second act, if you like. And so many people just disappear. Women leave the workforce, change careers, start their own businesses, and just seem to go off, do their own thing, and you never get to hear the really important stuff that they've learned. And I'd love to see more women doing that, making themselves visible to the generation of young women that are coming through a period where they're not sure what's going to happen for their careers because of what's occurred for them in their studies. So that's a very rambling way of saying I hope women stay visible and that we get real focus on, you know, choosing where we want to spend our face-to-face time.
Thank you, Tony. I think it's about owning your story and not being afraid of being a role model and becoming more vocal about sharing your experience, because there's value in experience, in all of our experience. And if you can take a little nugget of wisdom in my experience, I will certainly get a nugget of wisdom from yours, and then the world will be a better place. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. But briefly, ladies, before we go on to questions, I think one, you know, maybe 30 seconds each on. So we've tackled very, you know, when we were talking about the trends that we've seen, we've seen really dramatic impact on gender equality, mental health, poverty, invisibility. So you've tackled the invisibility, Tony, but you mentioned policies, Hannah, definitely. Anything else that could be done so that, you know, should we have to go, God forbid, another you know, round of isolation, how could we protect the women who have been, you know, negatively impacted? What can we do as women to help all of them out there? Elizabeth, 30 seconds, just because we have the luxury of it.
I think we definitely need to ensure connectivity, and that's the difficulty has been that a lot of women have perhaps had to conduct their communications via one small smartphone, whereas perhaps their partner has had the laptop and all the equipment. And then that woman has had to share that smartphone with their children who've been trying to home learn. I heard an interview with a 15-year-old lad who said his mother and 3 siblings were all sharing one phone for schoolwork. Now that's absolutely untenable. And then the mother was trying to do her own work as well. So I think there's a lot to be done in terms of ensuring that everybody has equal access and that women have equal access to the sort of IT and communication equipment. I think there is severe deprivation in terms of technology.
Thank you. I think it's critical. I remember a friend saying to me, "Thanks God we all have a laptop. I don't know how I would cope otherwise." So yes, absolutely spot on. Yeah, Hannah, you know, very briefly as well. What? So you've mentioned the policies. What else would you do for the women out there?
Yeah, I would say, Meryl, we need as women to challenge stereotypes. We need to challenge the systemic inequalities that are perpetuated by traditions and power structure. We need to challenge leaders who create barriers to gender equality and women equalities worldwide. We need to challenge laws and legislations that don't anymore serve our community and serve gender perspective. So this is mainly, I would say, we need to challenge all of these things.
Just that, yeah. And then tomorrow you'll do, what else would you do? But thank you, Hannah. Absolutely agree with you. What about you, Fiona? What do you think?
Well, if we do all of the things that Elizabeth and Hannah have mentioned, we'll be doing really well. I think, Elizabeth, you make a really good point about IT and accessibility to some of the tools that you need to be able to operate virtually. And Muriel, I do think there is a high likelihood that we're going to end up in lockdowns in the future again. And I know, but we can't be ostriches about it. It's one of those things. I think it's just the way that things are going to pan out in the future. And something that occurred to me about this access to things that we know support our health and well-being. And there are some companies that do a recycling of clothing and shoes in order that all of these health benefits of being able to go out for a walk or a run can be realized. And you know, that actually stops some women and men, but women, from doing the things that they're being encouraged to do, because they just do not have the things to do that. So if you can't access an online yoga class, and you can't access your work, and you can't actually go out for a walk, you're going to end up completely deconnected from, you know, the rest of humanity, and in a very sorry, sad state. So I think there are some simple things that we can do with IT, with clothing, and with support networks. And if we do that, along with all the policies that we're going to challenge from Hannah's perspective, that should do well.
Okay, so that's for the day after. And then Tony, what are we doing on Friday then?
On Friday, oh, I don't know. You're going to put our feet up. I think
Yes.
I think the one thing that I have been really conscious of is sometimes we just need to give ourselves a break, because you think I need to do this, and this, and this, and this. Oh, and by the way, my jeans don't fit me anymore, and I haven't done that, and the dog hasn't been wormed, and so I think there's a lot to be said for just saying sometimes I'm just not doing it today. I'm giving myself a day off from beating myself up. But yeah, I think as Elizabeth and Fiona and Hannah have said, all of those other things, there's some huge issues that need to be addressed. But I think for us individually to just take the pressure off ourselves, you know, even if it's only once in a while, there's a lot to be said for that.
I think it's a very valid point. Thank you so much, ladies. Shall we, Jennifer, shall we take the audience questions, please?
Yes, thanks, Muriel. So we've got 2 questions related to times of crisis. So the first one, particularly aimed at Hannah, from Selma. Are discussions already happening on an international level regarding frameworks to protect women during times of crisis or endemic? The second question is, we have been through wars and recessions in the past, and we've come through them. I think also Hannah mentioned Ebola and the Zika virus. What can we learn from history in order to have a better transition out of this issue, this pandemic?
Very good questions. Hannah, over to you.
Yeah, definitely the discussions already started since last year, and the UN Women, as we all know, the European Commission and the International Labour Organization, they all issued so many reports to highlight the impact on women and what governments need to do in order to tackle these issues. We know that within the frame of the SDGs, of the Sustainable Development Goals, we have SDG 5. So there's a continuous commitments from countries on a national level to kind of align with SDG 5. And whenever they align with the SDGs 5 and with the targets, they've already gonna tackle all these challenges that women have. Maybe the focus really now are on domestic violence, and that's why we can see lots of the forums, lots of the seminars are tackling these issues in order to highlight the importance of that aspect, especially that lots of, if we're talking about the global aspect, especially of the countries, they don't have measures to tackle gender-based violence in specific. So with COVID-19, now there's a huge, I would say, a pressure from governments and from, UN level on countries to tackle these issues and to find new legislations and new regulations in order to kind of overcome this challenge. With regard to the second questions, as I mentioned, there's a lot need to be done. We know that, yes, from previous crisis, we didn't learn that much. And I would say that the reason we didn't learn that much because we didn't have that data that would help us to define the problem, to identify solutions. So this is really our challenge with this pandemic, with COVID-19, that we need to have more data on the impact on women, on exactly what, and to hear from those women. And according to these, data, we can bring solutions that will help to recover faster and to have this word that we have, equal word.
Fair enough. So it's all about being evidence-based, providing data for decision making, and evolve the policies accordingly. Any adds to what Anna mentioned just now on the matter, ladies? No, thank you very much. I think the one point that, if I may, ladies, we haven't mentioned is education. I think that there's a huge part, also policy, absolutely, but also education of, the way we teach young girls that they can do anything that they want, regardless of whether they want to be firefighters or astronauts, and also young boys to teach them equality as well. I think that would be a huge step forward. Any other questions? Sorry?
I was going to say on that point, Muriel, I've got a son and a daughter. So my daughter's 14 and my son is 12. And my son did say once, why is it that all the books of inspirational quotes are for girls? And that's it's a valid point that he raises. But I think lots of things that have been happening now give us an opportunity to talk to children about what is going on in the world. And certainly, for my daughter, I will discuss my salary with both the children and how I contribute to the household, because I think there's so much we screen from our kids and then expect them to go out into the world of work, and they don't know necessarily there might be a gender pay gap. They don't know how to make sure they can ask for what they're worth. So I do think that you're right. It's a conversation that we need to have really, openly, and these circumstances allow us to do that because they're much more literate when it comes to the news than certainly I ever was. Because I just had The Sun when I was growing up, and there was no news in that whatsoever.
I can't comment on that, but okay.
One thing to be added, Meryl, because you've mentioned education. According to the UN statistics, at the moment there are 132 million girls out of school. So we can see really COVID-19 had a tremendous impact especially on girls' education, and especially in communities where education is not priority. And we saw also a huge increase in early marriages and harmful practices on girls. So when it comes really to education, also globally, it has unfortunately a tremendous negative impact on girls.
Okay, let's have a positive question and a positive answer. We need to lift the mood.
No pressure. No pressure then. This isn't quite so positive, but the second one is. So 2 comments from Melissa and John around how we demonstrate the seriousness of this issue through things like statistics. And I know Hannah's just mentioned some there. Melissa also talked about suicide rates increasing and worryingly increasing around females up to the age of 24. So how do we, I guess, raise our own awareness and knowledge on some of the statistics to demonstrate the seriousness? And then a slightly more positive question from Selma is, there is a lot of positivity, and it's wonderful that we all recognise this. If you think about Captain Tom Moore, etc. How do we build on the positivity to address the needs? For example, could we use our neighbourhood group to identify mental health and support it? Any way to share these best practices? How are we going to share this best practice?
Thank you, Jennifer. Shall I give the first question maybe first to Elizabeth and then Tony to comment?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think definitely in terms of trying to raise morale and to give support, that actually a very good starting point is at the local level. And if people already have built a relationship with each other, it is much easier to support each other rather than having something imposed from afar. So my recommendation undoubtedly would be to try to look for the local groups that are supporting each other and providing not only that sense of neighborliness, but also actual physical support of one sort or another. So I think I'd start at the local level and hope that that then actually translates itself very well into the UN Sustainable Development Goals and so on, and that they're not separate, but if you start at the local level, you can perhaps have greater impact on people's lives.
Absolutely, because it becomes very tangible more quickly. Thank you. Tony, would you like to add anything to that?
I think the local thing is important, and some things I hope will stay. People have set up little book swapping things around the village. I think that will continue, but you know, I live in a village community and I know it's different when you live in a town, which I have done too. I did want to, the point there just about suicide rates, I think one thing I've observed is there are organisations that are not talking about it when people die from suicide in their businesses, and they are talking about people who die from other causes. And I would like to see organisations taking responsibility for communicating honestly with their staff and using that as a opportunity to signpost services. So I think that we shouldn't be afraid to talk about all of the real things that are going on right now, whether that is period poverty, so can you donate tampons to your local secondary school, or whether it is serious mental health problems. So I think having that open conversation and starting at a local level so we can equip ourselves with the master data that gives us a good perspective to then, you know, seek to open up some conversations with the people that live closest to us, and then that might connect us to the people we are most able to directly help.
No, absolutely. Thanks a lot for that, Tony. Absolutely. And I would look at you, Fiona, for the positivity question and how do we maintain it?
Well, I think Tony makes a really valid point, and I'm looking at some of the comments in the chat there as well. And you know, having access to counsellors in schools is essential if we're going to help young women not take their lives. We want to put some measures in place to make sure we nip it in the bud and provide a support mechanism that allows people to feel that they can be heard so that they don't take their lives. And suicide is such a taboo subject in not just in this country, but I think globally, it's just not talked about. Death is too. Death and suicide are two words that you just don't hear in common parlance. And I think the more that we can debunk those words and make them accessible to people, then people can explore it and understand what they need to do to manage themselves in a better way. So I think access to support in organisations is really important. So counsellors in schools would be a great start, particularly in England, but also access to support in organisations, because of the pressure to work flexibly when we're in a situation where people are having to juggle, women are having to juggle working from home, homeschooling, running a home. It's really important that they have access to be able to speak to someone when things are getting too much, so that when you get to that stage of overwhelm, there are some mechanisms in place that you can feel connected, you can feel supported, and you can feel heard. I think that would make a tremendous difference.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Fiona. The being heard is so important. Mm-hmm. Yes, because sometimes even if the other person doesn't say anything, if they're not at the right time when you're talking, it's enormous. No, absolutely. It's been a fabulous conversation, ladies. Thank you so much. And thank you for the audience for all the great questions. I hope you've enjoyed the session as much as I did. I think we put our fingers on very important matters, and hopefully with the amount of passion, goodwill, and good intentions that collectively we all hold, we have to change the world. I can't see any other options, really. So I'll pass you over to Richard to conclude the sessions, but definitely a huge thank you from me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, over to you.
Thank you, Muriel, and echo everything you say there. So thank you ever so much, Elizabeth, Fiona, Hannah and Tony, for being our panelists. What an engaging hour that was. And I made some notes, and there's no doubt that there will be challenges from what everyone said going forward, especially around equality and bias, in light of that shift towards flexible and home working, and also around mental health and isolationism and connecting, getting that connectivity back. So the kind of overall feeling I had was of cautious hopefulness, I suppose, for the future. I don't doubt that things will get better, and we will overcome some of these challenges. And there's no doubt that COVID, as well as causing some serious problems, have created some opportunities to create behaviour change and to move us forward. So thank you all ever so much for your time today. It's been a real privilege for CSRA to have you all and to hear everything you've said. I will wrap this session up, and just to say that this has been recorded, and I will make this available to all the panelists and to all the delegates who signed in. So thank you for joining us today, everybody, and I hope that's been of use. And have a lovely evening, and keep an eye out. CSRA will continue to deliver engaging panel sessions on key topics over the coming months. So keep an eye out, and hope to see you again then. Thank you very much.
Maybe before people
Bye-bye.
before people disappear, we could mention the training on social responsibility, Richard, and the fact that the more you know about social responsibility, the more you can take care of gender equality, of giving equality of opportunity, providing diversity within your workforce. And the next cohort is starting on April the 15th.
Thank you. Yes.
So,
yes.
Well said, Muriel.
Right.
just caught in time.
Yes, we do have, yes, it's a 1 hour course that's run for 6 modules, so 6 hours over 6 weeks, every Thursday from 11 o'clock. It's an excellent course that teaches you about the origins of social responsibility, and then takes you through the benefits. And again, the idea of encouraging organisations and businesses from small to large to be responsible about their behaviour and actions in the future, especially towards the environment, towards the workplace, and about supporting communities and charities. So do please sign up for the training. It is for everybody, and it creates enablers in you. In order to have great social responsibility, we need to have enablers out there to make sure that it happens. So thank you, Muriel, for bringing that in at the end. Great call. And on that note, thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Pleasure meeting you, ladies.
Lovely to
Take
meet you
care.
all.
Bye.